Jackson has a host of talented young people who participate in the arts. One of these groups is Ballet Arts, the community youth ballet. April 1st and 2nd at the Perkins Civic Center, they'll perform the ballet Copellia. Here to tell us about it are two of the dancers in costume, Riley and Dory Scott. Thank you guys so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
So first off, what motivated you guys to study ballet, and how long have you guys been doing it? We'll start with Hannah.
I started when I was 3 years old, so this is my 14th year dancing, but my 8th year in the company. It started off just as a casual, my mom putting me in it as I was little, and then it became something like more that was in me, something I wanted to do, so I just kept doing it.
And Dory?
I started dancing classes around the 1st grade, and then this is my 6th year in the company itself. I mostly started because of my older sister. She would take dance classes and I would stand in the door threshold and watch her dance and try and copy it. And so when I was old enough, I got to join and I was really excited.
So Dory, before you ever start rehearsals for a production, how important is it for you to know the story behind the ballet?
It's helpful because it helps you emote when you're on stage or even just rehearsing. Our teacher, Ms. Pat, will tell us some of the story of the background of the scene when we first start. So it's pretty important to know what's actually going on before you start dancing.
Yes, so Hannah, we know that Copellia is more than 150 years old. It's a story of a doctor who makes a life-size dancing doll. Tell us a little bit more about the story.
Well, actually, Dr. Copellia is a doll maker because he makes Copellia. But Franz he's a villager and he falls in love with Copellia, but he doesn't realize that Copellia is a doll. He thinks she's a real person. And so Swanhilda, Franz's fiance, has to prove to him that Copellia is a doll. So her and her friends go on a little adventure into Dr. Copellia's house, breaking and entering. So they find out that she's a doll and they're just laughing at the fact that Franz thought that she was real.
So when you first read through the story, what was your reaction to it? And we'll start with Dory.
My first reaction was, first of all, how did he mistake a doll for a girl? Because she sits on a balcony on stage and she'll sit there with her book. But surely if you really looked at her for long enough, you'd notice that she never turns the page. And then my second thought was at the end, Franz and Swanhilda Swanhilda forgives Franz and they reconcile. And I'm just wondering, how did Swanhilda forgive him? Because he fell in love with a doll.
I thought it was just, first of all, it was just really confusing because I was just like, what is going on? Because it was just kind of all over the place. But once you really start reading it into more detail and paying close attention to the little details, you can start to tell how the story actually unfolds and tell everything, like what Dory was saying about the plot.
So Dory, what was the most difficult part in preparing for the show?
Probably learning about the story itself, because if you're into opera and classical ballet, you more than likely know the story, but just the general public really doesn't even know that something like this exists. So it's a little hard to find a synopsis of it. You have to dig pretty deep.
So we have about 30 seconds left. So real quickly, you'll be performing Copellia at the Perkins Civic Center April 1st and 2nd. What time will the performances be, and what's the cost, and how can people get tickets?
April 1st is a Saturday night at 7 p.m. and April 2nd is a Sunday at 2 p.m. And you can get tickets at balletarts-jackson.org or at the Commerce Center, the Pat Brown School of Dancing.
Well, thank you guys so much for being with us here today. Coming up, we'll continue with our focus on the ballet arts. Dory will give us a condensed version of the story of Copellia. That's just ahead right after these messages.
Drawing from a tremendous underground aquifer, JA's water supply is sand filtered by nature. This water supply is not only plentiful, it requires minimal treatment. Continually lab tested for quality, it's the water distributed through the Water Division at JEA. More than once named by the Tennessee Association of Utility Districts as West Tennessee's best tasting water. Clean water, another part of JEA today.
as Copellia is about a doll that comes to life, we're inviting all the children that come to our show to bring a doll with them so that during intermission they can come on stage and have a doll parade. Another new thing we're doing this year is we're having a narrator join us on stage so that you can know the story of Copellia as it happens. First, though, this is a condensed version of the story. Many years ago, there lived an old doll maker named Dr. Copelius. Early one morning, Dr. Copellia stepped out his front door and looked up at his first floor window. The window was open, and inside sat his most perfect creation, a life-size doll he called Copellia. "She looks as if she were alive," he thought. As Dr. Copelius disappeared into his house, Swanhilda emerged from her house. Swanhilda was full of joy. She was betrothed to Franz, the most handsome and charming young man in the entire village. As Swanhilda passed by Dr. Copelius' house, she noticed the girl in the window. Swanhilda stood under the window, curtsied, and smiled. "Good morning," she called. The girl in the window ignored her and went right on reading. To be pleasant, Swanhilda curtsied again and said, "Excuse me, I wish to welcome you to our village." Still, the girl gave no indication she had heard Swanhilda. "Perhaps she thinks herself too grand to talk to mere villagers." She turned to leave, but just then she caught sight of Franz approaching. Curious to see what would happen when Franz noticed the newcomer, Swanhilda decided to hide close by and watch. Franz came to the square to cross to Swanhilda's house when the girl in the window caught his eye. Bowing graciously, he said, "May I say good morning? My name is Franz." When the young lady showed no sign of interest, Franz thought, perhaps, being a stranger here, she is very shy. Franz bowed once more. "I see you are a newcomer to our village. I bid you welcome." Still, the girl took no notice. This surprised Franz. It was the first time a young lady had not wished to speak with him, and it stung his pride. Out of sight, the doll maker crouched behind Copellia, winding a key in her back, pleased that Franz believed his creation to be real. In a moment, the winding was done. The doll lowered her book, raised her hand to her lips, and blew a kiss in Franz's direction. Franz blew several kisses in return. Swanhilda, who had been laughing a moment before, was suddenly very jealous. Leaving her hiding place behind, she ran home. Later, the square was full of people. The burgomaster made an announcement. "On the morrow, the new town bell is to be dedicated. In honor of this event, there will be special festivities, and any couples who marry will receive handsome dowries from the lord of the manor." Several men proposed on the spot and were joyfully accepted by their sweethearts. Only Franz and Swanhilda hesitated. "You love another." "What do you mean?" But without another word, Swanhilda hurried away, leaving Franz amid the celebrating couples. In the late afternoon, Dr. Copelius emerged from his house, carefully locked his front door with a large key, which he tucked into his coat pocket, and headed to the inn. He hadn't gone far when a group of village boys began to tease him. Dr. Copelius raised his walking stick. "Leave me alone," he shouted. The boys ran off. Dr. Copelius drew his handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his brow. He was too agitated to notice that his key dropped to the ground. Cursing the village boys, Dr. Copelius continued, passing Swanhilda on the way. Swanhilda noticed the key on the ground. Realizing that this must be the key to Dr. Copelius' house, she picked it up. "I'd like to have a word with the girl who blew kisses to Franz this morning." At the top of the stairs, she reached the doorway to a large room. The fading light filtered through the windows, and all about the room were menacing figures. They were perfectly still, but they looked just like people. Swanhilda gathered her courage and looked closely at one of the figures, then laughed. "Why, it's only a doll," she cried. But where was the girl Swanhilda had seen in the window? Behind a curtain in the corner, she found the girl. Swanhilda reached out to touch the stranger. She was as cold and lifeless as the other dolls. Meanwhile, Dr. Copellia was making his way back home. When he reached the square and saw the door of his house wide open, terror struck him. He ran into his house and up the stairs. When Dr. Copellia appeared, Swanhilda slipped into the corner and let the curtain fall back, concealing her. Dr. Copellia looked at the curtain that concealed his beloved Copellia and saw that it was closed. No sooner had he sighed in relief than he heard a noise. He jumped up and went to the window, which was being opened slowly from the outside. Franz climbed stealthily into the room. Dr. Copellia pounced on him. "You robber! You thief! No, I haven't come to rob you. I saw your daughter today, and I've fallen in love with her. I'd like to speak with her. With your permission, sir." Dr. Copellia brightened. "You wish to speak to my Copellia? Then let us have some wine and talk a little." Franz was a bit suspicious and hesitated. "Come," Dr. Copellia coaxed. "You have nothing to fear from me. I'm just an old doll maker." So Franz sat and accepted the wine. Soon he began to feel dizzy, for the wine contained a potion, and in a few moments he was fast asleep. Dr. Copellia was overjoyed. Here was his chance to experiment with a magic spell and bring Copellia to life. He fetched an old volume and came upon the spell. "I must draw the life force from this youth and transfer it to my Copellia." Dr. Copellia went to Franz and showered life force over Copellia 3 times. The first time, Copellia stood up and dropped her book. The second time, Copellia blinked. The third time, Copellia took a deep breath. It worked! I brought her to life! Now Copellia, who was really the clever Swanhilda in Copelia's clothes, was eager to create mischief. She danced over to the magic book, reaching out to tear its pages. "No, Copellia, you mustn't!" "Mustn't I?" she retorted, and she flew about the room, disrupting things and setting off all the doll's mechanisms. Dr. Copellia did not know what to do with his unruly creation. By this time, the wine had begun to wear off, and Franz woke. He looked and saw that it was Swanhilda flying about the room. "Whatever are you doing in that dress?" he asked, confused and guilty about his pursuit of Copelius' daughter. Swanhilda turned to Franz. "If you want to know, come and look at the beautiful girl you fell in love with." Swanhilda ran to the corner and threw back the curtain. There, Franz saw the same girl he had admired and realized she was no more than a doll created by the old doctor. "Oh, how foolish I have been. It is you I truly love, Swanhilda. Will you forgive me?" Swanhilda gladly did, for she was very much in love with Franz, and the two ran down the stairs to find the burgomaster to tell him that they would indeed marry. In the years that followed, Dr. Copelius came to terms with his broken dreams. He went on making more imaginative and perfect dolls, but he never again put one in the window of his house.